about censorship, but it is about how the IRB erodes academic freedom, which is related, but not quite the same thing. This is actually the story of how Nate Honeycutt, who's here. Nate, are you here? Would you wave just so people? He's up next in the next panel anyway, so you will get to know Nate. Who's now a research scientist at FIRE, this is a story of how he and I were investigated by the Rutgers IRB repeatedly for nothing. Nate joined my lab as a grad student in 2016. By 2018 or so, we had begun collaborating on surveys that investigated political bias and the radicalization of the American faculty, which was also the subject of Nate's dissertation, which he completed in 2022. I'll come back to all that in a second. In 2022, we were subjected to 3 separate audits of our work initiated by the Rutgers IRB. So an audit, at least at Rutgers, I don't know how this works anywhere else, is like the IRB believes something bad happened. They are not, for some reason, they need to bring in an outside investigator to evaluate, I don't know, potential for wrongdoing. I think that's what it is. I'm still not completely sure. But anyway, so they brought in this outside investigator who is charged with performing, and this is a quote, for cause review of our research. We still don't really know what for cause means, but it's something like the IRB received at least one complaint about the study from a participant. And so that automatically triggered. As far as I can tell, the complaint could be Jussim was wearing a black hat. But it's a complaint. And so as we understand it, every complaint triggers this sort of audit. Okay, so, I don't know, I've been doing this not quite 40 years, never had anything like this happen before. It was kind of shocking, but like, okay, whatever, we don't have anything to hide, we'll just sort of roll with it. But then, we were notified about a second audit on a different study, and not long after, a third audit on a third study. And we're like, what the fuck is going on here? This is just like completely bizarre. I can speculate, but I'm gonna hold off on my speculations of what's going on just to describe what actually happened. The IRB had received complaints from participants supposedly about the validity, the scientific validity of our surveys. And they were told that our survey questions were biased, offensive, and being used to draw conclusions to support a political agenda. We didn't see the actual complaint, but that is what they told us the complaints were. Okay. Right. Yeah, I did that already. So the outside investigator, 3 times for each study, required us to produce documentation of every single aspect of these 3 projects. All of our data, the research protocols, all the informed consents, recruitment materials, survey instruments, full questionnaires, data analysis, like code and stuff, records of all communications with the IRB and with participants. So occasionally people would contact us directly and say, oh, this study seems really interesting. Can you, send me it when it's published? All of that we had to compile. They asked us to compile, because this is so much information all over the place, they asked us to compile explainer documents so that they would understand what we were giving them. And over the course of the 3 audits, we eventually produced over 3,000 pages of material. There were interminable phone calls. We spent more than 5 hours in meetings, right? Each time we had to have these extended meetings. And this went on for 6 months. Again, we never really understood what was going on other than this sort of fishing expedition to see if anything was wrong. So this was just a huge, huge waste of time because, of course, none of the investigations turned up anything because there's nothing. Like, you can't make this up. Each time, the auditor reported that there were no regulatory findings discovered during this review, as the study followed the approved protocol, which is what we did. Okay, so every aspect of this is ridiculous, but the most ridiculous thing was the IRB's handling of this. Complaints like this should have been dismissed out of hand because they're irrelevant. Why are they completely irrelevant? We are absolutely, if we want to ask biased questions, we're completely allowed to ask biased questions. You've heard talk after talk about how field after field is politicized. If we are doing to reach a political conclusion, if everybody else on Earth has the right to do so, so do we. And I don't think that's what we were doing, but certainly we have the right to do that if we wanted to. Okay. Oh my God. This is just, yeah, right? So, so we were investigated repeatedly for the equivalent of being accused of driving 54 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone. That is, even if they were completely true, there was no violation of anything. So let me give some context for the sort of accusations of biased questions. So we were studying political extremism among faculty, and often we administered a left-wing authoritarianism scale. So here are just 3 items from the scale. And they're on an agree-disagree measurement format. All political conservatives are fools. If a few of the worst Republican politicians were assassinated, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It is important that we destroy the West's nationalist imperialist values. And it goes on like this for like 35 questions or something like that. So yeah, are these biased questions? Well, yeah, of course they're biased questions. That's the whole point. We're trying to see if you're holding these extremist views. Duh. And in the social sciences, at least in this kind of sort of political work, we administer measures of asking people about their belief in conspiracy theories, all sorts of prejudice beliefs, derogatory beliefs. Do you agree with derogatory beliefs about all the various and sundry groups? Willingness to condone political violence. This is normal social science. This is what social scientists do all the time. Okay. This is what I'm about to say also is completely normal, and we did this. But although it does get back to the autonomy thing, all our study participants had signed a consent form before participating. Like, they agreed to do the study. None of them had to do anything. They could have dropped out at any point. If they found a question they didn't like, they didn't have to answer it. I mean, they were completely free to do whatever the hell they wanted, including not answer a single question. Okay. And so given all this, given that everything had been approved, given that we weren't accused of actually violating anything that they had approved, the whole thing should have just been dismissed out of hand. The system is clearly easily gameable by malevolent actors with vindictive motives. So, I have a public persona, and there was a tiny number of complaints. We were surveying thousands of people. We suspect, we don't really know, we suspect that I annoyed a couple of people, and this is a way they could kind of stick it to us. That's what we suspect. We don't really know that. But if we hadn't kept these meticulous records, the consequences could have been terrible. I mean, Nate's dissertation could have blown up, which would have been terrible. Instead, it was sort of delayed by all this nonsense that we had to do, but it wasn't really terrible. The IRBs were originally designed to ensure ethical treatment of research participants. That's a completely reasonable and appropriate purpose. It's good that they do that. But with rare exceptions, the IRB's purposes are irrelevant to the type of social science we and lots of other social scientists conduct. That is, we're mainly asking people questions. You can't harm someone by asking a question. I mean, you could ask about something sensitive. You could ask about drug addiction or criminality or odd sexual behaviors, but they don't have to answer it. It's like you just move on. This is these kinds of questionnaires shouldn't even require IRB approval. Okay. When the IRB,
You're getting the look.
I'm getting a look? Oh, I'm almost done. I'm almost done. When it violates academic freedom in this way, it's, you know, when the IRB oversteps its mandate in this way, it's a clear violation of academic freedom. And until there's some way of reining in these runaway investigations, I suspect things will only get worse. And it's really simple. All they need to do is provide an off-ramp. You have an accusation. Even if the accusation is true, there's no violation of anything. So long, see you around, goodbye. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. That's it. End. But, you know, none of this would be hard to implement. You know, you can implement an off-ramp if you wanted to. But, you know, you could do that if the will was there. All right, thank you.